This presentation has been split into three parts. First, we'll learn how to interpret momentum indicators using the rate of change as an example. Next, we'll consider the fascinating subject of our 1 and 2 bar price patterns. Finally, returning to momentum again, where we'll look at specific indicators, the RSI, the MACD, and the stochastic. Well, the methods of trend determination considered so far have been concerned with the analysis of the movement of the price itself through trend line, price pattern, and moving average analysis. These techniques are extremely useful, but they identify a change in trend after it's taken place. The use of momentum indicators can warn of latent strength or weakness in the indicator or price being monitored, often well ahead of the final turning point. Right now, we'll examine the general principles of momentum interpretation that apply in some degree to all momentum indicators.
Momentum is usually plotted under the price series it's monitoring, and it shows up as an oscillator, fluctuating around an equilibrium point of balance. Momentum, as I use the term here, is a generic one embracing all kinds of oscillators. Four common ones are rate of change, RSI, MACD, and stochastic. Many software packages also include an indicator called momentum. That too is just another oscillator and falls under my generic terminology. Just as fruit describes apples, oranges, grapes, and so forth, momentum embraces many different indicators. Just as all fruit has specific characteristics that apply to them all, so do momentum indicators. For example, fruit is usually sweet and typically grown in the warmest season. In the same way, momentum indicators have specific interpretive techniques that apply to all of them. Divergences apply to every form of oscillator, so do overbought, oversold lines. If you're not familiar with these concepts, fear not, because I'll be covering them shortly. My main point is that the initial part of this presentation is concerned with explaining these, what we might call generic interpretive techniques. Remember that specific techniques will apply to certain indicators in a more relevant way. For example, all oscillators lend themselves to trendline construction, but this technique is usually more usefully applied to a jagged indicator such as a rate of change or an RSI than a moving average type system such as the MACD or stochastics. In our price pattern presentation, I used rectangles as an example for the interpretation of other formations. In the same way, we'll be using rate of change as our case study that will then be applied to other indicators. For the moment, though, it's very important to note that actual buy and sell signals can only come from price action, from a reversal in the trend of the price, and not from the momentum series. Bearing this in mind, here we see the price and momentum rising simultaneously, but just because oscillators may change direction, it doesn't mean that prices will also. Momentum's valuable contribution is to tell us when the underlying technical structure is weakening or strengthening. It's very important to note that the use of momentum indicators assumes that markets or stocks are experiencing a normal cyclic rhythm, which is expressed in price action by rallies and reactions. However, in some instances, counter-cyclical reactions are almost non-existent. Price movement is then reflected as a linear uptrend or a linear downtrend. This is an unusual phenomenon, and when it develops, momentum indicators fail to work. This is why it's of paramount importance to use momentum analysis in conjunction with some kind of a trend reversal signal in the price itself. In that way, we can be more confident that the price is being sensitive to momentum conditions. Principles and application of momentum indicators. The following description of the principles and use of momentum indicators applies to all forms of oscillator. They can be roughly divided into two broad categories. One, those that deal with overbought and oversold conditions, divergences, and the like. I call these momentum characteristics. If you study momentum indicators or oscillators, you'll find that they have certain characteristics that are associated with subsurface strengths or weakness in the underlying price trend. It's rather like looking under the hood of an engine. Quite a lot of the time, you can identify mechanical trouble before it becomes self-evident. 2. The identification of trend reversals in the momentum indicator itself, which we might call momentum trend reversal techniques. In this case, we're making the assumption that when a trend in momentum is reversed, prices will sooner or later follow. Trend determining techniques such as trendline violations, moving average crossovers, and so forth, when applied to momentum, are just as valid as when utilized with price. The difference, and it's an important one, is that the trend reversal in momentum is just that, a reversal in momentum. Momentum typically reverses along with price, but often with a small lag. But I reiterate again, just because oscillators change direction doesn't always mean that prices will too. Normally, a reversal in the momentum trend acts as confirming evidence of a price trend reversal signal. In effect, this momentum signal performs the act of supplementary witness in our weighted the evidence approach. I'll have more to say on this a little bit later. But for now, let me recap that actual buy and sell signals can only come from a reversal in the trend of the actual price, not the momentum series.